It was supposed to be one of the happiest days of our lives. The sun was warm, the sky clear, and the whole campus buzzed with excitement. Emily had worked so hard to get here, and as I sat in the crowded arena watching her walk across the stage in her cap and gown, I felt nothing but pride. She spotted me in the stands, waved, and grinned so wide I thought my heart would burst. For that moment, I forgot about the tension that had been building in my marriage. I pushed away the nagging thought that David had been acting cold for months. Today was about our daughter. After the ceremony, we went to a small restaurant just off campus. It was intimate, with white tablecloths and the smell of grilled steak filling the air. Emily's closest friends were there, along with my sister and David's parents. Everyone was laughing, snapping pictures, and passing around menus. Emily sat beside me, her cheeks flushed with happiness, talking about job interviews and her plans for the summer. I could feel her excitement, and it made me so glad we had all gathered to celebrate her. David was unusually quiet. He checked his watch a few times and barely touched his food. I thought he was tired, maybe overwhelmed by the long day. I kept brushing it off, telling myself I was imagining things, that he would relax once the wine started flowing and the food came out. When the waiter refilled our glasses, David suddenly stood. He tapped his spoon against his glass, and the clinking sound cut through the chatter at the table. Everyone turned to him, expecting a toast for Emily. I smiled, waiting to hear him say how proud he was of her. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, "I think this is the right time to say, I want a divorce." The words hit like a brick to the chest. For a second, I thought I misheard him. The room went still. Emily's smile fell from her face, as though someone had pulled the ground from under her. My sister froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. The waiter, standing by the door, looked away awkward. Emily slammed her hands on the table. "What? Are you serious? You couldn't wait one day? This is my graduation." Her voice cracked as tears welled up in her eyes. I couldn't speak. My body went cold, and my hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly I thought my knuckles might snap. I felt like I had been stripped bare in front of everyone. My mind was spinning, searching for words, but nothing came. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. People at nearby tables were staring. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Emily pushed back her chair and stormed out, sobbing. David sat back down, calm as if he'd announced the weather. I stared at him, still frozen, my throat dry, my chest heavy. And in that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same. I sat frozen in my chair, unable to move. My sister leaned toward me, whispering my name, but I couldn't answer. It felt like the walls of the restaurant were closing in. All around me, people were staring, whispering, waiting to see what I would do. I felt stripped, exposed, humiliated in a way I couldn't put into words. Emily came back inside after only a minute, her face streaked with tears. She stood at the edge of the table and glared at her father. Her voice was sharp, trembling with anger. "You just ruined everything. This was supposed to be my day. How could you do this to me, to Mom, right here?" She was shouting now, her words echoing across the dining room. David didn't flinch. He set his glass down, leaned back in his chair, and spoke with a flat tone. I didn't want to fake happiness anymore. I thought it was better to be honest instead of pretending. Emily's hands shook as she pointed at him. "Honest? You wait until we're sitting here, in front of everyone, to be honest? You couldn't wait until tomorrow? You couldn't even let me have this one night." Her voice cracked, and she turned away, pressing her hands over her face. I finally found the strength to breathe, but I still couldn't form words. My eyes moved to David, trying to make sense of the man sitting across from me. His expression was calm, almost smug, like this was a business deal he had just wrapped up. That coldness made something in me shift. This wasn't a sudden outburst, not a decision made in the heat of the moment. He had planned this. He had chosen this exact time, this exact place, knowing the damage it would cause. My stomach turned. I looked at his hand, resting near his phone. The screen lit up once, and I caught the way his eyes flickered toward it. He had been doing that all evening, sneaking glances when he thought no one noticed. For a split second, his mouth twitched, almost like he was waiting for a message. That was when I knew there was more to this story than he was saying. He didn't just wake up one day and decide he was done. There was something, or someone on the other end of that phone. I wanted to demand answers, to scream at him the way Emily was screaming, but my voice wouldn't come. My throat was tight, my chest heavy, and the only thing I could do was sit there, staring at the man I thought I knew. Emily's sobs filled the silence between us. My sister tried to comfort her, wrapping an arm around her shoulder, but Emily pushed her away and stormed out again, her footsteps sharp against the tile. I stayed there, still frozen, watching David lift his glass and take another slow drink, like nothing had just shattered. The house felt different after that night, quieter, heavier, as if even the walls carried the weight of what had happened. David moved around like a stranger, speaking little, keeping his distance. I couldn't take it anymore. On the third day, I finally asked him to sit down. We were in the kitchen, the clock ticking louder than usual, the smell of coffee still hanging in the air. "Why now?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "Why on Emily's graduation day of all days?" He leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and smirked, like he'd been waiting for me to bring it up. "Because I'm done pretending," he said. "I found someone better." The words stung worse than anything he'd said before. I stared at him, trying to process. "Someone better?" I repeated, almost in disbelief. "Yes," he said with a shrug, as if he were talking about trading in an old car. "She makes me happy. She understands me. Something you haven't done in years." I felt my stomach twist, but I pushed through the dizziness. "Who?" He hesitated, his eyes shifting just slightly. That was all I needed. My gut told me there was a name, and I wasn't going to let him leave without saying it. "Who is she?" I pressed, my voice sharp now. He finally looked me straight in the eye and said it like a challenge. "Karen." The name hit me like a slap. For a moment, I couldn't place it. Then it clicked. Karen, Emily's old high school English teacher. The same woman who once sat at our dining table, sipping wine, laughing at David's jokes. She'd been in our home, complimenting the curtains, asking me for recipes. She was someone we had trusted, someone Emily had admired. "You're joking," I whispered, but I knew from his expression he wasn't. The betrayal sank deeper, crawling under my skin. She was Emily's teacher. She was in our house. My voice shook, but David didn't flinch. "She's a grown woman," he said coldly, "and she cares about me in ways you never did." I wanted to scream, to throw something, but the pain was heavier than the anger. The image of Karen sitting at our table years ago played in my mind, her smiling face, the way she had asked Emily about her essays. I felt sick. Later, when Emily came home, I told her. She listened, her face pale, her hands trembling. At first, she didn't believe me. Then she saw the look on my face and realized it was true. "Karen," she whispered. "Dad is with Karen?" I nodded, and her eyes filled with tears. "She was my teacher. I trusted her." Her voice broke as she turned away, shaking her head. "How could he do this to us? To me?" I reached for her, but she pulled back, wrapping her arms around herself, as if she was trying to hold her whole world together. In that moment, I knew she felt the same as I did, betrayed twice over. David packed a bag one morning without saying much and walked out the door. He didn't ask about the mortgage, the utilities, or the groceries. He just left it all sitting in my lap, like I was supposed to figure it out on my own. The silence in the house was sharp, but it wasn't peace. It was the sound of being abandoned with everything to carry. Bills piled up on the counter. I stared at them late at night, wondering how I was supposed to cover it all on my salary alone. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me, but the sting of betrayal pressed harder. Word spread fast. Family called, asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. Neighbors glanced at me in the driveway, their polite smiles hiding whispers I could feel in my bones. Everyone seemed to know, even before I had the strength to explain. Their pity was almost as hard to take as his cruelty. Emily shut down completely. She refused to return her father's calls, deleted his messages without reading them, and when he asked if he could still attend her graduation party, she told him no. Her voice was sharp and final. "You don't get to be there after what you did." She blocked his number, and for the first time, I saw how deep her anger went. It wasn't just hurt, it was rejection. David, of course, didn't take it quietly. I heard from mutual friends that he was already telling people I was bitter, that I was poisoning Emily against him, that I had been impossible to live with for years. His version of the story painted me as the villain, and him as the poor man finally breaking free. It burned. Every time I heard his lies, it felt like being dragged through the mud. But I kept my head high. I refused to give him the satisfaction of watching me crumble. At night, when the house was too quiet and the weight of everything pressed hardest, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to let him win. He could move in with Karen, he could tell the world his twisted story, but I wasn't going to break. Not for him. Not for her. I had Emily and she had me. That was enough to fight for. And as I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by bills and silence, I decided I would fight, even if it meant dragging myself through every bitter step. Because if he thought he could humiliate me and walk away untouched, he was wrong. Grief sat heavy on me at first. I would wake up in the middle of the night, reaching for someone who wasn't there anymore, then remember why. The hurt came in waves, anger, sadness, shame. But slowly the feelings began to shift. It was like a fire burning low in my chest, not as wild as before, but steady. I realized I couldn't stay broken forever. One afternoon while sorting through papers, I noticed our joint savings account was lighter than it should have been. At first I thought I made a mistake, but after checking the records twice, it was clear. David had pulled money out quietly before he left. He hadn't said a word, just taken it for himself like I didn't matter. I wanted to call him, to scream and demand answers, but I stopped myself. Yelling wouldn't fix anything. He would twist my anger into proof that I was unstable. Instead, I picked up the phone and called a lawyer. I didn't tell anyone at first, not even my sister. I sat in that office and laid out everything, how he left, what he had done, the money missing. The lawyer listened carefully, then nodded. Start keeping track of everything, he told me. Every dollar, every message, every lie. The more details you have, the stronger your case will be. When I came home that night, Emily noticed something different in my face. She sat across from me at the table and asked, "What did you do today?" I told her the truth. I said I had gone to see a lawyer. Her eyes lit up, a mix of relief and pride. "Good," she said firmly. "Don't let him walk all over you, Mom. He doesn't get to take everything and just leave." Her words steadied me. I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was showing her how to stand tall when someone tries to tear you down. So I began collecting. I went through every bank statement, every receipt. I kept a notebook in the drawer where I wrote down dates, conversations, times he had come by. I saved the text messages where he tried to rewrite the past, the ones where he acted like I was the problem. Every page I filled made me feel stronger, like I was slowly taking back ground he thought he had stolen. I didn't tell him what I was doing. When he called, I kept my voice calm. When he tried to provoke me, I didn't rise to it. Outwardly, I let him think I was broken and quiet. Inwardly, I was building something, stone by stone, fact by fact. For the first time since that awful night at the restaurant, I felt in control. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing, and David had no idea what was coming. It didn't take long for me to see that David was in a hurry. He called more often, not to ask about Emily, but to push me about the divorce papers. His tone was sharp, impatient, as if I was the one holding his future hostage. "Let's just get this over with," he said more than once. "No need to drag it out." At first, I couldn't understand why he was rushing. Then I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Karen wanted things finalized quickly. She didn't like the idea of him still being legally tied to me. She was pushing him, and he was pushing me. That was when I knew I had leverage. Instead of rushing, I slowed everything down. I let paperwork sit a little longer before signing. I asked my lawyer to file extensions and request more documents. Every step of the process became heavier, slower, drawn out. David grew more frustrated with each passing week, and I stayed quiet, watching him unravel from a distance. It was during one of those meetings with my lawyer that we found something. Going through financial records, there were payments and transfers that didn't match what David had declared. After digging deeper, we uncovered a side business he had been running, one he hadn't disclosed. The money was tucked away, hidden, as if he thought I'd never notice. My lawyer leaned back in his chair, tapping the papers with his pen. "This," he said with certainty, "is going to swing in your favor if we play it right." I felt a calm I hadn't felt in months. David thought he was in control, thought he was moving into his new life, while I sat at home licking my wounds. But the truth was, I was building something solid under his feet, something he wouldn't see until it was too late. In public, I kept my role. When people asked how I was, I gave soft smiles and said I was managing. I let them see the picture of the heartbroken wife, trying to get through the day. I didn't let on that behind closed doors. I was preparing every detail to use against him. Even when David tried to bait me, I didn't give him what he wanted. He would sneer and say things like, "You're dragging this out because you can't let go." I would answer calmly, "I just want to make sure everything is done properly." Inside, I burned, but outside, I stayed steady. It was almost satisfying, watching his temper rise while mine stayed cool. He thought I was weak, but he didn't see that weakness had turned into patience. I was no longer playing defense. Quietly, carefully, I was turning the tables, and soon, he would know exactly what that meant. The first time I saw David again in front of our family was at his cousin's barbecue. I hadn't wanted to go, but Emily asked me to. She said it was important that people saw I wasn't hiding, that I wasn't the one ashamed. So I went, holding my head high, even though my stomach twisted the whole drive there. David showed up with Karen. She clung to his arm, smiling too brightly, her laugh carrying across the yard like she wanted to prove something. A few relatives greeted them politely, but the mood shifted. You could feel it in the way people looked at them, glances that didn't linger, conversations that ended as they walked by. I stayed calm. I made small talk, helped set out food, asked about people's kids. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look desperate. When the moment came, I didn't even plan it. It just slipped in naturally. We were sitting at the picnic table, plates full of ribs and corn. One of David's uncles asked how Emily was doing, and I smiled. "She's doing well, though she's still hurt about her father leaving her graduation dinner early. It was hard on her, especially after finding out it was because of, well, this." I gestured slightly toward David and Karen, my tone steady, almost casual. The table went quiet. A few forks paused midair. His mother's face fell, her lips pressing into a thin line. She turned to David with a look I hadn't seen before, full of disappointment. His father set his beer down without a word. David stiffened, his jaw tightening. "That's not the whole story," he muttered, but no one rushed to defend him. Karen's smile faltered. She shifted uncomfortably, her hands slipping from his arm. For the first time that day, she looked small, aware of the eyes on her. The word was out now, unspoken but heavy: homewrecker. Conversation moved on, but not easily. People stayed polite, but the warmth was gone. David tried to join in, tried to act as though nothing had changed, but laughter around him felt forced. His cousins who once clapped him on the back kept their distance. His parents didn't speak to Karen at all. I didn't need to say more. I sat quietly, watching the space widen around him. The support he had counted on was slipping away, piece by piece, replaced by silence and disapproving stares. When it was time to leave, David reached for Karen's hand, but she pulled it back quickly, pretending to adjust her purse. She walked ahead of him to the car, her shoulders stiff. I drove home with Emily, neither of us saying much, but inside I felt something settle. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't caused a scene. All I had done was tell the truth in a steady voice. And that truth was enough to start unraveling the little world David thought he had built. The day of the first hearing, I sat in the courtroom with my lawyer by my side. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, and every sound seemed to echo: the shuffle of chairs, the low murmur of voices, the gavel striking to begin. David walked in wearing a sharp suit, Karen close behind him, her chin lifted like she was trying to convince herself she belonged there. He carried himself with confidence, but I could see the cracks in it. His eyes darted to me, then quickly away. My lawyer leaned close and whispered, "Stay calm. Let the facts do the work." When it was our turn, we laid everything out. Bank statements, transfers, receipts, all showing the side business he thought he had hidden. My lawyer explained in detail how money had been moved, how accounts didn't match what he declared. The judge listened carefully, asking pointed questions. David's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, fumbling for explanations that didn't land. I sat still, hands folded, while David's face grew redder. He tried to argue, claiming I was exaggerating, but the paperwork spoke louder than he ever could. By the time the judge gave the ruling, the air in the room felt heavy. David was ordered to pay significant spousal support. The majority of our marital property, our home, our savings, even the car, was granted to me. His side business, the one he thought was his safety net, was pulled into the settlement. Across the room, Karen's face changed. The confidence drained, replaced by something closer to fear. She looked at David, her mouth slightly open, like she was seeing him for the first time. This wasn't the wealthy, untouchable man she thought she had secured. This was someone who had been caught, exposed, and cut down in front of everyone. Then came Emily's turn. She walked up to the stand, her voice shaking at first but growing stronger with each word. She spoke about that night at her graduation, about the way her father had humiliated her mother in public. She described the pain of watching him walk away, and the strength she had seen her mother show since. Her words filled the room with a quiet that was different from legal silence. It was emotional, raw, and honest. I could see the judge listening intently, his expression softening as Emily spoke. By the end, there wasn't a person in that courtroom who didn't feel the weight of her testimony. When she stepped down, I reached for her hand. She squeezed mine tightly, her eyes wet but steady. David sat back, shoulders slumped, no more words left to fight with. For the first time, he looked small, and in that moment, I knew the tide had turned fully in my favor. After the hearings were done, David tried to act like nothing had changed. He showed up at community events with Karen on his arm, dressed neatly, smiling too wide. He wanted people to believe he had moved on, that he was living a better life. But the truth was clear in the way people reacted. Conversations stopped when they walked up. Invitations grew fewer. Neighbors who once waved now turned the other way. It didn't matter how hard he tried to appear proud. The whispers followed him everywhere. Everyone knew what he had done, and no one admired it. Karen felt it too. She kept her head high at first, but with every cold shoulder and every awkward silence, her smile thinned. When David's money troubles started, she was the first to notice. Bills piled up, the support payments weighed him down, and the side business wasn't enough to cover it all. He couldn't take her to nice dinners anymore, couldn't buy her the things she wanted. Slowly, her patience faded. One evening I heard from Emily that Karen had left him. No big fight, no scene, just gone. She packed her things and moved out, leaving him with a half-empty apartment and debt he couldn't shake. For a man who once stood so smug, it was a steep fall. Meanwhile, my life was moving forward. I sold the house, the place filled with too many memories, and bought a condo I had always dreamed of. It was smaller, but it was mine, bright, open, with a view of the river that made mornings feel peaceful again. I filled it with things that made me happy. New furniture, plants by the windows, colors I had never chosen before because David always had an opinion. For the first time in years, every corner reflected me and only me. Emily visited often. She would sit on the couch, looking around and smile. One night, as we ate takeout together, she leaned back and said, "Mom, you showed me what strength really looks like." Her voice was soft but full of meaning. I looked at her, the daughter I had carried through so much pain, and felt something warm settle inside me. I hadn't just survived, I had built something new, something better. David, on the other hand, was left with nothing but his own choices. Bitter, broke, and alone. The world he thought he had control over had crumbled, and there was no one left to blame but himself. For me, life was no longer about what he had taken. It was about what I had reclaimed. My freedom, my peace, my voice. And I held on to them like treasures no one could ever steal again. A year passed faster than I expected. Seasons changed, new routines settled in, and life felt steadier. When my sister's daughter graduated from college, Emily and I drove together to the ceremony. The drive was filled with light chatter, laughter, and the kind of calm that had been missing for a long time. The hall was full of family and friends, the air buzzing with pride and excitement. Emily held my hand as we found our seats near the front. I looked at her, grown and steady, and felt grateful that despite everything we had faced, we had made it here together. After the ceremony, the family gathered in a rented hall for dinner and speeches. The tables were decorated with flowers, the smell of food filling the room, the clinking of glasses echoing off the walls. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, holding my glass, my heart steady. I didn't plan a long speech, just a few words that came from a place of truth. Family isn't just about the good days, I said, my voice carrying across the room. It's about standing together through the hardest one. It's about finding strength in each other when life tries to tear you apart. My eyes moved toward Emily. And it's about learning that sometimes, what feels like the end is really the beginning of something better. The room grew quiet, and I could feel every word land. I glanced around the hall, taking in the faces of people who had seen me at my lowest and now saw me standing taller. At the far back of the room, I caught sight of David. He sat alone, shoulders hunched, his eyes fixed on me. His glare was sharp, but he said nothing. No one sat beside him, no one leaned toward him. He looked out of place, a shadow in a room full of light. For a moment, our eyes locked. The memory of that night at Emily's graduation came rushing back. The shock, the humiliation, the way my world had collapsed in front of everyone. But now, standing here, I felt none of that weight. I felt calm. I turned my gaze back to Emily, who was smiling up at me, her eyes filled with pride. My chest warmed, and I lifted my glass toward her. "He thought he destroyed me at our daughter's graduation," I said clearly, my voice strong and certain. "But all he did was set me free." The table erupted in applause, glasses clinking together, the sound filling the room. Emily squeezed my hand, and I smiled wider than I had in years. David stayed in the back, silent, his glare swallowed by the noise of celebration. And for the first time, I knew he no longer had any power over me.